Welcome to the video. Today we will explore whether breaking a lease actually saves you money or quietly sets you up for long-term financial pain. We will proceed step by step, beginning with what your lease actually says, then progressing to how to calculate true savings, reviewing credit and rental history risks, handling roommate dynamics, and ending with a practical action plan. Along the way, we will include visual diagrams, example math, and quick quizzes to reinforce key ideas. Here is the agenda. First, we will emphasize the importance of reading the lease. Next, we will calculate true savings by factoring in rent, penalties, and commute costs. Then, we will discuss the risks to credit and rental history. After that, we will cover roommate obligations. We will then move to a practical action plan, illustrate with example numbers, and close with short quizzes to test understanding. Many tenants feel trapped by high rent and long commutes long after signing a year-long lease. It is tempting to break the lease and move to a cheaper unit. However, the penalty and the aftermath can be severe. We will evaluate whether the numbers actually work and what the hidden consequences look like. The first and most important step is to read the lease. Find the early termination clause and study it carefully. Typically, the penalty is 2 to 3 months of rent, but your lease specifies the exact amount. Do not rely on what friends say or what you assume. Ask the landlord to confirm details in writing if anything is unclear. Once you know the precise cost, you can accurately calculate whether moving makes financial sense. To evaluate the move, compare your current rent to the proposed new rent and compute the monthly difference. Next, incorporate commute savings. A 44-mile daily commute adds substantial recurring costs in fuel, maintenance, and depreciation. Also, account for one-time moving expenses such as moving trucks, application fees, new deposits, and utility transfers. Finally, subtract the lease-break penalty. This yields an approximate break-even in months. If the net benefit is small or takes too long to recoup, the decision is unlikely to be worth the financial and reputational risk. This table illustrates an example. Suppose your current rent is $2,200, and your new rent would be $1,700. Your commute costs drop from $400 to $120 because you move closer to work. Utilities and other expenses remain the same. Your monthly total falls from $2,900 to $2,120, saving $780 per month. If your lease break penalty is 2.5 months of current rent, that is approximately $5,500. Your break-even period is the penalty divided by monthly savings, which is roughly 7.1 months. If you have only a few months left on your lease, breaking it is likely a bad deal. If you have many months left, it could be mathematically favorable, but you must still weigh credit and rental history risks. This flowchart begins with confirming whether your budget is overextended. It moves to reading the lease and identifying the penalty. Then you compute monthly net savings, including commute costs. A decision checks whether the savings are positive and whether the break-even occurs before the lease ends. If not, the recommendation is to avoid breaking the lease and to pursue income improvements and budget reductions. If yes, the next decision is whether there is a cosigner. If there is, obtain their consent and a written plan because they are jointly liable. Next, verify whether subletting is allowed and approved in writing. If subletting is permitted, attempt to find and screen a subtenant. If not, negotiate with the landlord for alternatives or a payment plan. The flow concludes with either proceeding with a sublet or negotiated exit, or sticking it out while improving income. There is a hidden risk many people overlook. Even if you pay the early termination fee, the fact of breaking a lease can mark your rental history and make future landlords view you as higher risk. If you do not pay the penalty, the account can be sent to collections, harming your credit score and making new approvals extremely difficult for years. Combining a marginal credit score with a broken lease often increases deposits or leads to outright denials. On the left, staying preserves your rental history, buys time to raise income, avoids moving costs, and still allows for subletting if your lease permits it. On the right, breaking a lease can reduce your monthly expenses but requires paying the penalty, introduces risks to credit and rental history, and adds logistical challenges such as moving, reapplying, and timing. The better choice depends on the math, the time left on the lease, your credit profile, and whether your lease allows safer alternatives like subletting. If you co-signed, you share full responsibility for the lease. You cannot unilaterally break it without legal and financial consequences that can fall on your roommate. They may be forced to cover the entire rent or face eviction along with you. Always coordinate decisions and document agreements in writing. Prioritizing short-term savings over long-term contractual obligations can damage relationships and jeopardize future housing stability. Follow this action plan in order. First, read the lease and get the penalty amount and terms in writing. Second, compute your net monthly savings after accounting for commute reductions and moving costs. Third, verify whether subletting or lease assignment is allowed and obtain written approval. Fourth, negotiate with your landlord for alternatives such as a payment plan, a shorter notice period, or a lease transfer. Fifth, work to increase income through better jobs or side hustles. Sixth, reduce expenses by renegotiating bills, canceling unnecessary subscriptions, or adding a temporary roommate if permitted. Finally, set a specific decision checkpoint date to evaluate progress and avoid impulsive decisions. This sequence diagram shows the communication flow. First, the tenant requests early termination terms from the landlord. The landlord replies with the penalty and conditions. The tenant coordinates with the co-tenant to confirm shared obligations and consent. Next, the tenant asks the property manager for written approval to sublet or assign the lease and receives the policy and required conditions. The tenant lists the unit, screens candidates, and submits a candidate for approval. The landlord responds with approval or rejection. Finally, the tenant completes the documentation. Always verify whether you remain liable after subletting. Quiz time. The penalty is 2 months of rent at $2,100, which totals $4,200. Monthly savings are $350 in rent plus $200 in commute, for a total of $550 per month. There is also a one-time moving cost of $600 to include. Please pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the correct answer in the next section. The math can be handled in 2 ways. Strictly speaking, the penalty is $4,200, and the one-time moving cost is $600, for a total of $4,800. Dividing by $550 per month equals about 8.7 months. If you considered only the penalty, $4,200 divided by 550 equals about 7.6 months. The key takeaway is that break-even is much longer than many expect, often well beyond 5 months. Second quiz question. You co-signed a lease with a roommate. Can you break the lease alone without affecting them? Options are listed. Please pause the video now to think about the answer. We will go over the correct option in the next section. The correct answer is that co-signers are jointly responsible. You cannot unilaterally break the lease without consequences for your co-tenant. They may be required to pay the full rent or face eviction, so coordination and written agreements are essential. This timeline lays out a 90-day plan. On day 0, read the lease and confirm the penalty in writing. During the first week, calculate complete monthly savings including commute and set a realistic budget. In the second week, request written approval to sublet or assign the lease and start listing the unit. From day 15 to 30, screen candidates and negotiate with the landlord. Between days 31 and 60, apply for higher paying roles, begin a reliable side hustle, and reduce expenses. At day 45, reassess the numbers to make a decision. From days 61 to 90, execute your chosen path, either moving forward with a sublet or staying and focusing on savings. This content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal or financial advice. Lease terms and local laws vary widely. Consult a qualified attorney, housing counselor, or financial professional for advice tailored to your circumstances. To summarize the most important points: read the lease and obtain penalties in writing. Compute true savings including commute and one-time moving costs. Protect your credit and rental history by avoiding collections. Coordinate with roommates because co-signers share responsibility. Prefer subletting or negotiation when possible. If you must move, proceed carefully and understand your break-even timeline. In conclusion, breaking a lease can relieve short-term cash pressure but often creates long-term damage. Lead with the numbers. Include the penalty, commute, and moving costs. Prefer safer strategies such as subletting, negotiation, and increasing income. Make decisions using a plan and checkpoints rather than reacting emotionally. Thank you for watching. If this video helped, please like, share, and subscribe. Share your experiences or questions in the comments. Your story could help someone else make a better decision.